In today's notes, we're going to be finally using our greatest common factor lesson previous to this to help us figure out how to factor quadratic trinomials. Quadratic because the highest exponent is 2, trinomials because there are 3 terms. What we learned today is going to help us immensely in Unit 3 and Unit 4, and you're going to see this come up throughout math from now on, so it's really important that we understand it. So we're going to learn how to factor, which is sort of like dividing, when a equals 1. What I mean by a equals 1 is the formula for a quadratic trinomial is ax squared plus bx plus c. It's important to remember these letters because we're going to be referring to them a lot today. So in example 1 that's already done for us, we have 2 methods shown, the x method and the box method. You can use either, it does not matter. First I'm going to go over the x method. With the x method, you are going to fill in the top and the bottom of the x. The top is going to be whatever a times c is. Well, a, b, and c. A is 1, and c is 12. So 1 times 12 is just 12. B is going to go in the bottom. B is -7, so we just put -7 in the bottom. Now we have to think of the greatest common factors of 12 that multiply to 12 but add to -7. So when I think of numbers that multiply to 12, I think of 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. All of these multiply to 12, but not all of them add or subtract to 7. 1 plus 12 is 13, and 12 minus 1 is 11, so that will not give us 7. If I added 2 and 6, we'd get 8. If we subtracted, we get 4. Again, that's not 7. But if we added 3 and 4, we would get 7. However, because it's negative, we make both -3 and the 4 negative. It's okay that they're negative because a negative times a negative is a positive. So -3 times -4 is positive 12, and -3 plus -4 is -7. The answer would then be written as x minus 3 times the quantity x minus 4. If we multiplied all of this back together, we would get our original quadratic trinomial. The other method is to use the box. With the box, you're going to fill out the top left and the bottom right boxes. And you're going to use the same method, but I'm going to go over that down here. So, in example 1, we're doing x squared plus 3x plus 2. First we'll use the x method, then we will use the box. A and c are 1 and 2. 1 times 2 is 2, and b is 3. So we want to think of numbers that multiply to 2, but add to make 3. So we have to find the numbers that multiply to 2 first. The only numbers that multiply to 2 are 2 and 1. So those are our only options. 2 times 1 is positive 2, and 2 plus 1 is positive 3. So we actually don't need to change any of the signs. Our final answer would therefore be in the same exact format, with x coming first, plus 2, quantity x plus 1. If we wanted to use the box method instead, this is how we would do it. We're going to pretend that we don't have our answer yet. And we're going to fill in the box. So the first step is filling in x squared. It goes in the upper left-hand box. The second step is filling in 2 in the lower right-hand box and leaving these 2 open. These two boxes need to add to make our term, which is our b term. So we can start filling out some of this without having to think of that yet. For example, I know that x times x is the only thing that's going to give us x squared, so we can fill out those. Now we have to think of the multiples of 2. 2 and 1 again are the only things that multiply to 2. They also happen to be the things that add to positive 3. So because we figured that out, we'll put 2 here and 1 here. It doesn't matter if you switch them. And we're going to test this. 2 times x is 2x. X times 1 is x. When we add these together, 2x plus x gives us the b, which is 3x. And you'll see that our factors are along the top and the sides of the box. X plus 2 and x plus 1. So in both methods, we got the exact same answer. In our second problem, it's a little bit tougher because we have a negative, so we need to think more about this one. We'll do the x first. 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. Our b is just 1. So we need to think of multiples of 6. We have 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. Those are the only things that multiply to 6. We now need to think which one of these would add or subtract to 1. 1 and 6 would create 7 or 5. 2 and 3, though, we could subtract those to get 1. So we've figured out our numbers. Now we just need to figure out which one is positive or negative, or are they both positive or both negative. Well, we know that if they have to multiply to negative 6, the only way to be left with a negative is if we multiply a positive and a negative. So we know one of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. If we want them to add to make 1, we know that the 3 needs to remain positive because it's bigger. Therefore, the 2 is going to be our negative. So our final answer should be x plus 3, x take away 2. Now let's try this again, but using our box. Our first step is to fill in the upper left, which is x squared. We know that x times x gives us x squared. And then negative 6. Again, you think about the same things. What are the multiples of 6? And again, you go through the same thought process of which of these is going to add to make my middle term. We know that 2 and 3 are the only numbers that could give us 1 by subtracting them. So we'll fill in 2 and 3. And again, we have to think about if we want them to add to make a positive 1, the 3 has to stay bigger, and therefore the 2 will be the negative. So then we're going to fill out the rest. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. 3 times x is 3x. This means that x plus 3 and x minus 2 are our factors.